welcome to the Backstage Creative, the podcast that focuses on the people who work behind the scenes of theater. My name is Krista Copper. Today is my conversation with Dominique Hill, who is a costume designer. Head on over to the Backstage Creative Facebook page. That's where I've started to do kind of unofficial show notes, like putting up people's websites that I interview. So be sure to head on over there, like that page, and you won't miss out on all of the good stuff. So here we go. Here's my conversation with Dominique Hill.
Yeah, I currently live in New York, but I'm hopping back and forth from coast to coast. So LA is also home as well.
Oh, nice.
hmm
Um, what are some differences between designing in New York versus LA? What does that look like?
I would say the way you plan your day also affects the way that you kind of design. So in New York City, it's spontaneous because you know that you have the leisure of walking somewhere or hitting up a contact or like going to your favorite store at the blink of an eye. And in Los Angeles, you have to really plan out your day. So if something does pop up, you should definitely like have an arsenal of things so you can take care of it yourself until you're able to get that extra assistance. So designs really depend on you as an artist, but I've noticed in New York City, it's more gritty and trash to treasure, and LA has more of like a clean mod aesthetic if you're talking about just something off of instinct rather than a specific time limit to do a project.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Like drawing inspiration from the city that you're working in. That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Where else do you find inspiration?
Really, in just looking at people, like it's something that has been reiterated basically from every costume designer is the mere fact of just like studying individuals, like seeing how they live their lives, watching how they wrap their jackets around their waist. And that's inspirational because it doesn't necessarily tell a story about them, but it's a story about the environment. And also it's ancestral in so many different ways. So that's pretty rad. And art, nature for sure. I love nature. So I'm always there to recharge or get some type of inspiration to like fill my cup up so that I can help fill up other cups artistically and for self as well. So I would say people and definitely nature. And when they both combine, it's like the perfect like combination.
Yeah, I think as artists, something that I've really learned is just the art of observation. Like just
Yeah,
watch, just watching. Not putting any judgment on anything, but just watching and looking and
mhm.
observing and letting like the inspiration come to you instead of trying to force it.
Definitely.
So take us through. I'd love to hear about your background, where you're from, how you got into theater, how you got into design, and highlights of what led you to where you are today.
I'm from Bronx, New York, born and raised. I love the Bronx. And I attended SUNY Albany, which is upstate New York, for undergrad. And as an undergraduate, I was trying to find myself and dive into these different arsenals of like, who am I? So joining all these different clubs. And, but I've always loved theater. I loved theater when I was in high school. I tried acting. It didn't really work out. I was like, okay, this is not gonna fly. So then I had to fill the quota of having, something as like a prerequisite to have it as my minor. So I had to choose like an elective. And I was like, oh, what is costumes? While I was a criminal justice major, because I was really gun hold on CSI Miami and going to law school and fighting the good fight. And so, but once I took my first costume class, like the gears started turning and I realized that it was actually a job to be a costume designer. And then I was just hooked ever since. So I switched my major to theater and I realized this later on. Like I realized this once I was like almost out the door. So last semester, my junior year, to try to switch it and get on the path of costume design. So I knew very early on, as I was discovering myself as well, that I had a quick learning curve for this profession. So I wanted to go to grad school. grad school is not for everyone. I don't even think everyone needs to go to graduate school to get
Hmm.
obtain the MFA in a certain design realm. But for me, I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to do. And that summer, I did like an internship at Virginia Shakespeare Festival. And I swear to you, it's just like super cheesy, but like I'm in the costume shop messing up whatever I was doing. I don't even know what I was doing. And this woman walks in, named Jennifer Tarani, and she had like this beautiful, like long, luxurious hair, and like there was this gust of wind behind her, and I was like, "What is going on right now?" Um, and so I was just like, "Oh my god, who are you? Like, what are you like? What's going on? What? Tell me about yourself." And she's like, "Hi, I'm Jen. I'm the costume designer for Hamlet." And I was like, "Oh my god, I want to be you. I want to." So then she was talking, getting to know her. I kept messing up, and she was very kind about it. And I was like, "No, that's crazy." She's like, "If you really want to be a costume designer, you need to go to UCSD." And so I'm just like, "Okay, bet. Like, this is gonna be super easy. Like, I'm gonna go to UCSD, bang, no problems there." So I go with my stick figures because I had no portfolio at the time, right? So I go with my stick figures and three strands of hair renderings, and I'm like UCSD. So somehow, by the grace of the universe, God, I got an interview, and I went out there. Never been to California a day in my life, and I'm like, what's going on? Beautiful experience. And I told myself, I said, I need to come here. I have to go to school. I have to. Of course, I applied to like NYU and other institutions at the time, but there was something about UCSD that I just I had to be there. I just felt like I needed to grow. So I'm now in my senior year, about to like close to graduation, meditating, all the crystals and stuff. I'm like, this school's for me. We hit it off at the interview. This is amazing. And my now mentor, Judith Dolan, who is Godsend, magical woman, she sent me this email. And the email was so long and it was so beautiful. And it was all the things that I should do so that I could reapply. And I was like so messed. I had these snot bubbles happening. I was in the closet. My best friend was also my roommate. And she was like, "Why are you in the closet?" And I'm just like, "Because I'm gonna have to be a person on the street now, because what am I supposed to do with my life?" And she's like, "Get it together." And I was like, "No, this is my school." So, but what was so magical about that email is that it wasn't cliche. It wasn't like, "Thank you, number 845. Thank you for
Hmm.
your service." It was more of like, these are all the things that I've seen you. These are the reasons why you were not able to be admitted to the school at this time, and please reapply, and hopefully you do a couple of these things. And I say it's the Bronx in me. And I was like, okay, couple, I'm gonna do it all. So literally that's what I did. Came to New York City, crashed with my best friend, and just did all the things on her list, which was like semi like kind of embarrassing things, like, applying to the National Yiddish Theater and getting the job and not speaking Yiddish. So we know how that went. But I was like, I need experience. So I'm gonna do this costume change, and I don't know what they're talking about, but I'm gonna smile. And then I reapplied and I got in, and then I like loved it, of course, and I learned so much. I was able to build my portfolio and meet beautiful costume designers that look like me. Representation matters so much, such as Tony Leslie James, who's like Tony nominated powerhouse, and came to New York and I started working in theater, and I loved it. Assisting, loved it. Regionally working, loved it. But I also miss California, and I love film as well. So I went out there, and then I came back to New York City. So I like this ping pong relationship that I have with both coasts because they fuel me in different ways. So yeah, that's the journey of how I'm here today.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm from like rural Kansas, like farms, like no professional symphony, no professional theater, like nothing. And
Yeah,
so like talking to someone who grew up like in New York City, in the Bronx or the Queens or whatever, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm so jealous that you got to grow up around that culture." Like how do you
yeah.
think growing up in the Bronx helped you shape your creativity or your artistry?
Oh, yeah, that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. A lot of times the Bronx gets a bad rep.
Yeah.
And it's like mention the Bronx to some people, and they hold their chests, and they tap into this esoteric like bank of sympathy for you, and you're like, why are you having like a heart attack right now? I am okay. I'm the person I am because of this environment, and the culture here is so rich. The communities here are so rich, and it allows you to double tap on that empathy button that I believe all of us has.
Mm.
And to be an artist, I believe you definitely have to tap into that as well, because you have to be in the understanding people business for sure. We deal with so many different energies day in and day out. You are also a conductor yourself, no pun intended, with like just, resonating different vibrations, and people come to listen to you, people come to see your work, people come to engage in your environment. And to be so kind of closed off into one type of culture, I think that does a disservice to a lot of individuals because they're not able to deal with different walks of life. And that is a blessing that I got being raised in the Bronx, because there's a multitude of cultures all around me. Everything from like Jamaicans, Africans, Hispanics. You could tap into like the Jewish community. It's just like this Islamic community. Every time you go to a different block, it's a different world. And you get to actually see how people interact with one another, and the sharing that happens between these communities is just unmatched. Yeah, I would definitely say that as a designer, I always try to approach every single story through an empathetic lens of just seeing like, what is this person going through, how is this person enhancing their environment by what they're wearing, and trying to decipher, how can we solve this issue by putting on or taking off these tangible objects, in whatever fashion that the script or project requires. And that's because I was just observing all these different individuals growing up.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I bet that also I would imagine that would help you too when you're in, like, the design room and you're working with the director or different designers. Talk about, like, empathy, when you're working with designers or, you're in the costume shop.
One thing I love doing, and I feel like it's like a secret power, but it's not really a secret power because I feel like everybody does it, but I just need to feel good. What it's like every time I go into a different costume shop, regionally, like Portland, or, I don't even know, Kansas City or whatever it is, it can be internationally as well. Before my ego gets into the way, which I think should be like as small as possible for every human, but as far as my ego gets into the way, or my designer brain, or like whatever gravitas I think that I'm going to bring to the table, I always try to approach every costume shop by saying, I'm walking into this person's establishment, which is usually the costume shop manager. How can I be of service to this particular situation? Because I'm going to leave, but they are going to sit there and still have the residual of the design that I did, the production that I had a part in, the energy that I left them. So I want to always start on a good note and end on a better note. And that is just by me asking the right questions, I believe. Like, how do you like your shop to function? When designers have come in the past, what didn't you like? Is there a station particularly that I could work at where I'm not going to disturb the other five designers that are coming in on rotation, because it's just not me in the shop. And it allows me to show that I'm not here to be a person that is willing to just take over this whole shop and think that I am the gun hold, empress of design, but rather I'm there to help with this community. You'd be surprised how many costume shop managers, because they are sitting there day in and day out dealing with all types of people, and some of them, to be frank, are not the nicest sometimes, and but they still have to do their job, right? They will look at you once you ask these questions and be like, thank you. Like, nobody has really asked me that in a very long time, and these are my opinions. And I have never had a bad experience in which, like, I've asked those questions and they've got honestly answered, and I didn't try to implement them. The end result has always been great. So empathy for the win as well. Directors are ridiculous, vulnerable, amazing beings. And their job, I don't know how they do it, but I'm glad that they do so that I don't have to.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I'm just like, what's going on? And so, and I learned this the hard way. You can approach every director with the one style that you have as a designer, because I love collaging. I also have attention span sometimes. You'd be like, oh my God, squirrel. And be like, what's like, what? Like, that's just how my brain works. But some directors are very like, I need a diagram. I need a graph. I need hard renderings. I have to see a drawing. I don't want this collage. I don't know what this button means. And I'm just like, but to me, I'm just like shrivel mouth. Like, this button is the button of his grandfather from 1860. And he's like, I don't, or she, or they, they're like, I don't know I don't understand this. So learning how that director communicates and finding a common medium so that I don't feel depleted, they feel satisfied, and also like they feel a part of the process. Because a lot of individuals, after like you have like the after production goes up and you talk about it, have like a like a discussion about reflecting on the project at a whole, sometimes they'll mention in the past that they didn't feel a part of the design process. Like it just seemed like a separate entity. And that to me is kind of sad because production doesn't happen unless every single compartment really, really works together. So yeah, just always tapping into how is the other person feeling and how can I serve this community the best way that I can through my artistry can never really steer you wrong. I mean, the worst thing someone could say is like, oh my gosh, she was like over sympathetic to like the whole situation and it just made me upset. It's like, well, okay, that's a little secret there.
Oh, that's such a beautiful quote. Start on a good note, end on a better note. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so wise.
yeah.
I bet that also helps with dealing with actors. So I think if I had to choose a job that I would not want in theater, it would be dealing with like costumes and clothes.
Oh my
Um, because
god.
of just you're dealing with actors who may have like insecurities, or you're really like sometimes I'm imagining you're gonna have to be a therapist, and I just like it just seems like a really taxing job, like trying to get everything fitted and designed and on bodies
Mhm.
by the time tech week. And I admire you guys a lot because that just from my perspective as a musician in the pit, that just looks really difficult.
Oh my god. Bless you guys. You know what it is? It's like, especially with my last experience, because before COVID really took a rampage over the the world, I was at Actors Theater in Louisville doing two shows out there, and I was doing this one production titled Grace. It was such a beautiful experience. It probably was like one of the most enriching experiences in which I learned as a designer because I think for the very first time I was completely confident in what I was doing. And it wasn't cockiness, it was just confidence of just like, okay, this is a little freakish right now in terms of like looking at this draping and looking at this build and looking at the body of the person because we had a couple builds that intertwined with the contemporary design elements of the show. And one thing that I learned in graduate school from a mentor is that the body is always primary. Again, the ego needs to go sometimes because you could be like, oh my God, this is amazing. This twinkle, twinkle, little star jumpsuit is going to look great. And then you put it on someone's body and it's just like, I'm still gonna make it work because this is my design. It's like, no, 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 no. You need to redesign or rethink something because their body is not calling for what you had on that paper. And so, like, that's exactly what was happening for this production. Like, there was so many times when I wanted to freak out, and I probably was freaking out on the inside of just being like, oh my God, Dominique, like, this is ridiculous. What were you doing? And then I was just like, no, you know what you're doing. And then on the fly, with their body being the primary canvas here, I just like recreated a different silhouette that spoke to them, and like seeing that individual light up because they had this bespoke experience right before their eyes was unmatched. And I'm just like, you can't pay me enough to see that in someone's eyes.
Hmm.
And so, like, yeah, everyone in the world is difficult sometimes, and everyone in the world is lovely sometimes. It's not something that doesn't cross over in the fitting room, but again, it is a costume designer's job to make the individual feel as comfortable as possible because it is such a vulnerable moment that they're exposing their body to be picked at and prodded at, literally, to be of service to whatever story that they're agreeing on telling. you can't be like a total wall towards how they're feeling. Yes, your job is to design a character, but you're still working with the human being. And so I tried to be more in tune with that, because sometimes, again, with the my mindset of just like, oh my god, squirrel, and like my mind goes crazy. Sometimes I don't really notice if someone is like being resistant towards something. And again, once you communicate the designs, like I worked on Hedwig at Portland Center Stage. If it wasn't for the community there, actors, drapers, costume shop manager, like putting their input into that show, it wouldn't have been better than anything that I could have drawn on my own. And it was just like an amazing experience to be open towards the actors and the community that's around you at the time. So, for sure, good lessons.
Do you have any routines in your life that help you, like talking about like quote unquote normal times when there's not a pandemic happening? Do you have routines in your life that help you stay healthy physically, emotionally, mentally?
Oh my god, I love these questions. This is so amazing. Yes, 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 yes. They've fallen off when there wasn't a pandemic happening in terms of like just trying to recharge oneself. But I love hiking. So I've gotten back to that with this period of stillness that we're in right now. So yes, I love nature, hiking, rock climbing. I also love surfing, but I can't swim. So I know in my heart that I love surfing. I'm gonna do baby steps to get onto the water safely. So I'm just gonna put that in the universe, surfing. Meditation has single-handedly saved my life. It's something that like I never really had time to do because I was just working job to job to job, and it was always like the hustle, the bustle. I gotta make it, I have to win. And when everything stopped, I really had to reevaluate who I was as a person, not what I did professionally, but who I was as a person. And I really fell back in love with meditation. So, for sure, I'm a meditation girl. I love crystals, I love all that jazz, and anything motivational. So, I have like Pinterest boards of like future self and like what I dedicate to be a law of myself, which are like just tons of quotations of like what I want to be, who I was, who I'm no longer, what is no longer serving me, and just affirmations all around, whether it's from like motivational cards that I pull every day to remind me to just live in the now, or like a book of poetry, diving into that. So yeah, I strongly believe that you're a better human being if your cup is full and is running over, because you can be of service to others, and we are in the service business. And for the longest time I was serving from like a dusty empty cup. And so like I'm trying to get back to just having a waterfall of abundance all around. And those things help me tremendously. And running. I love running. Yes, it
Yeah, me too. Yeah, you can't give what you don't have. That's
for
for
sure, for sure. Yeah.
I'd be curious if you don't mind sharing. What does your meditation practice look like? Are you using an app? Do you have like prompts? What does that look like?
I love the YouTube. So I have a playlist on YouTube in which I collect like motivational musical like sections of time. So if I am going to sleep and I feel like I want to do an affirmational meditative session, then I'll find something on my playlist that's like nightly meditation. Usually it's like 6 hours long, 8 hours long, and it's on a repetitive cycle. Like, you are beautiful, you are abundant. I'm like, okay, yeah. So I'm like sleeping with like all of this like awesomeness. In the morning, I try to do like 45 minutes. I try to do every morning, but sometimes I skip mornings. And it's a series. So it kind of starts off with a Gali meditation, universal meditation of just like starting the day off right for me. And then it'll go into, I recently started implementing like Black Girl Magic meditative session, which I love, and then self love. And so they play consecutively once the other one is done. And I put out my crystals, and I've been really obsessed with these inspirational bracelets, like quotations on your bracelet. And so I have like more than I should be charging on my Amazon account, but they're also there with my crystals, and I just lay them out and just dive in and wake up when my legs fall asleep or the YouTube videos stop.
Yeah, I'm finding, especially in this season, but also when things are as they used to be, it
Mhm.
you have to be intentional about health. Like it's not something that happens accidentally. Yeah, you have to be intentional about what you're putting in your mind and exercising and what you're eating, and it's something
Yeah.
that you have to work for, or it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And you gotta, it's nobody wants to be like, I wanna eat my broccoli today and drink my 8 glasses of water. Like maybe, sure. A very small percentage of human beings. But a lot of us are just like, that looks great over there and it's greasy and I want it. And I've recently given up meat, and so like that's been difficult, but it's also allowed me to explore different avenues of cooking for myself because I was on the go. I'd never would cook. I just was like picking up things randomly off like fast food or off the street or street vendor or whatever. So it's good. It's good. It's just good.
Mhm. Switching gears, how do you handle criticism of your work?
Ooh, you know what? I actually like it because it makes me a better designer and a better person, because I feel like when you're above reproach, that's when you get stuck and you're not able to develop into a better version of yourself. Don't get me wrong, I don't think you should take everyone's criticism to heart, because some people out there don't really know what they're talking about and they actually have ill intentions with their comments. So you have to pick and choose what you actually want to put into, like I say, your pouch of goodness or your arsenal of being a better artist. And you kind of know, but if it's, I didn't really, comments of just like, I don't really think that that costume serves a story, or are you sure about that choice, or it was okay, or nothing at all, not saying anything at all about my work, it just pushes me that much harder to be better. Or it's just like, I didn't really understand the choices that you've made during this process. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. Please tell me more. I think every time, and I have not met one designer that doesn't feel this way, or artists in general, but like everything that we produce is our baby. And so we have like thousands and millions of babies out there. And if someone like touches it and it crackles, we like die. And I think what we need to understand is that we created this wavelength in the universe. We have to let it be once the
Mm,
project is done so we can have space to create more. And it's just, being a conductor again of just allowing yourself to be a filtration system of art, being open to people interpreting it, how they interpret it. Not everyone's gonna like Basquiat, like it's the natural order of free thinking and opinions, and it's beautiful because life is boring if everyone just agree with you all the time.
mm, that's very true. Yeah, I've found you have to. I imagine it like a floor. Like my art is on top of the floor, and like who I am, like my being, my sense of self worth, my validity as a human is underneath the floor, and like
Ooh, that's good.
yeah, like there's a barrier. I like
Yes.
there's a part of me that's still separate from my art. But,
That's good. That's a very, very hard to do as well. I think I'm in that stage of learning the difference right now, like literally. But I love that visualization of just being like, I'm underneath this. Like,
mhm.
I'm just creating a surface. Oh, a surface floor, and is up for interpretation, but it doesn't affect me because I'm different. I'm different from that. I'm separate from that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna
Yeah,
take it. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use
go for it.
that.
Run crazy with it.
Yes, yes.
Switching gears again, I kind of jump around. I don't really have a. I'm really bad at transitioning
No, that's
between questions.
cool.
So, I noticed on your website that you have designed like as someone's assistant or as someone's associate. What does that look like when you're not the main designer but you're helping the main designer?
It literally, I think it looks like the same process as if you're designing the show yourself, but you kind of understand the lane that you're in. And it's not a lane that you should be condescended. It's a lane of mutual respect for the person that you're working with, and you understanding that you will always be learning in this business. And right now, learning for you is at the forefront. Whatever reason why you're doing it, some people assist because that's all they want to be, which is beautiful. They don't want to be designers, they just want to be assistants. Because primarily assistants, especially on Broadway, get paid more than the actual designer unless you hit like a big show. And then some people want to assist to get experience working under an established designer. Some people want to assist so that they can know the city and not have the pressure of like the show going in flames and them being blamed for it. You realize the stage that you're in and what applies at that given moment. And so, as an assistant, I believe that you should know the show either at the same capacity or better than the designer that you're assisting, simply because designers are always working on several projects that they don't even know of, because they're either panicking to see if they're going to get a call, because you're always afraid if you're going to get that call, no matter how established you are, or they have something on the books and they're literally working, pushing a clock to make that deadline. And it could be 3 to 4 projects at the very same time that they're designing the show that you're working on. So you need to be their eyes and ears, for sure, when they make the smallest mistakes or when they don't make any mistakes. They represent you and you represent them. And you don't want your captain to go out there looking crazy. And I believe it's your job to make sure that the show is ran as flawless as possible. It's hard because there is a different type of pressure that is on you, because if something goes wrong and they're not on site, then it automatically goes straight to you. And before you talk to whatever designer you're working with, you need to have a solution. It's the solution business as well. And people, it's hard to kind of make individuals understand this, but theater is also a business. It's not just fun games and like putting on makeup
Mhm.
and putting on costumes. So the machine has to be well oiled and it has to run properly. Sometimes it gets slippery because if a person that's assisting also wants to be a designer, they're excited because they're starting to get their own projects, but they're assisting this person. You have to understand what your commitment is at that time. And I'm all for watering your seeds, so that you can become established in whatever you want to become in this life. But at the same time, when you water all of the seeds and you pay attention, or you try to pay attention rather, to all of them, something is going to get neglected. One of the worst feelings is basically having a show not work out because you weren't all in as the assistant, because the designer will always take the heat. And they understand that once they take on a show, that they know that they cannot be there 100% of the time. That's why they hire an associate, which is just like an assistant at a different level, as basically they are the designer, but for whatever reason, whether it's business related or it's just a relationship for years with the individual and they only trust this one designer, their name is there and they have the last say so. But basically every production meeting, every staff meeting, every like fitting or so, that person would stand in for the designer. So they'll be deemed as the associate, which is an honor in itself. Yeah, it's its own world. And it's a beautiful world if you realize what you want to become in the end. I say this to everyone out there that is listening or is aspiring to be a designer of any sort, or not to be a designer of any sort. But first, narrow down what you want out of this industry and then work accordingly, because you can easily get wrapped up in the life of assisting and you actually want it to be a designer. So yeah, I think just establishing the pathway and realizing when it's time to let go or when it's time to continue, and just like a bird, just realizing when your wings are ready so that you can go out there and create beautiful stories for yourself or alongside some of your idols one day, whatever you prefer as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite aspect of being someone's assistant or associate?
Oh, yes. I love learning. Oh my God. I've assisted some amazing people, but I think at the very, very, very top of all of my experiences, it has to be assisting on the Tony Lizzie James. I say this because you look at different designers for different reasons, or at least I do, because I'm a little stalker and I'm kind of crazy like that. But I it's one of the questions that I asked my now mentor Judith Dolan when I first went to my interview, and I was like with my 6 figure portfolio, like I'm gonna get this. And I asked her, I said, "How are you able to still have a life? How are you able to be married and have children with a Tony, and just living your full life? How are you able to balance it all?" And she basically told me that there was moments in her life where she had to make decisions, her family or her career, and you have to choose at that moment what is more important to you. And when I think about that, and since that day, I've constantly thought about this as I've worked with different people, as I've developed as myself, as a professional in this world. I look to people to see not only what type of artist you are, but what type of person you are. I did my residency with Tony Leslie James on the Broadway show Come From Away. And being with her during that moment, I was like, oh, she's a woman that values family, and she teaches at VCU at the time. Now she teaches at Yale. And then when I was assisting on her for Color Girls at the Public, her aura was just so amazing. And in her own right, she necessarily didn't have to be that way. You know, like this woman has so many accolades, and her reputation precedes her in many different avenues, but she was. And that is something that I hold dear, because I do not believe in being nasty in order to be successful at any point. I don't think you need to do it. I think if you want to do it, it's a choice. And when you have such a wonderful spirit at the top of your game, teaching at an amazing institution and just like killing everything that you touch, like it's inspirational. And so the best aspect I can say of assisting or being an associate is learning. That's it. Just soaking everything up like a sponge and finding out who you are through all of the pieces that they leave you with, because they know some stuff, because they've survived this business for so long. So I love learning. I love learning. Let me not say I love. I really cringe at making mistakes, but when I make a mistake, I learn from it and I try to do better and be better. And it's worked out, especially in different scenarios with different people. So for sure, learning, learning.
Yeah. What keeps you in this career when things get difficult? Like what's the why that you keep coming back to when the bank account is running low, or jobs aren't picking up like you thought they would, or the design didn't go the way you wanted it to go, or what do you keep coming back to that keeps you in this industry?
These questions are gems. It would have to be my why. There's more times than none that I'm just like, Dominique, what are you doing? Like, what is going on? Like, this is insane. But I realized the reason why I started in the first place was because when I finally saw that Hamlet production go up as an intern, there was this magical combustion that happened within me of just seeing something that was a fleeting thought and creating it, and now seeing it on stage that is just unmatched to me, or film, or whatever avenue of which you want to explore, and realizing that clothing is a language, and I love discovering different slangs within it. And so with every project that I do or that I approach, I try to be more funkier than last time, because I mean, that's where the fun is, and that's where the spark is. And it brings me back every single time, because there's a rush that comes with designing a costume for a show and seeing what your mind like conjured up 6 months ago, however long the trajectory is for from start to finish, or just figuring out how to tell a story from a mere twinkle. And I just find that to be the closest thing to magic that I've ever really seen on this earth. And I think another thing too is realizing that I have something to say, and for the longest I would just be like a very quiet introvert, and I'm still an introvert and I love it. But I didn't find an avenue to express myself until I started to dive into costume design. And that's where I'm the wildest. That's where I can be Beyonce. That's when I can just like go into a different realm of myself and have fun with it and learn about people and their stories and what they've gone through and how they see themselves, and how they see me and what this costume means to them, and seeing that transformation in real time is it's just it's literally amazing. It's magical. It brings it back every single time. Every single time. I have this feeling sometimes when I don't create something that I am not being as productive as I once was. And I find that to not be true because, like anything, like a phone, like an athlete, you need time to recharge. And that guilt that comes with taking downtime shouldn't necessarily be there, because you tend to see you come back 10 times stronger when you are able to sit down and go back into that archive of your inner artist and pull out bigger and better ideas than what you've done before. So, yeah, I'm inspired by just creating, creation itself.
Mhm. There's a lot of magic in theater. And as I operate within like other art forms, like so as a musician, I play in all sorts of things. I play in community orchestras and jazz bands, and magic isn't really a word that people toss around as much. But like in theater, everyone's, I think every conversation I've had for this show is the word magic has come up, and I just love that that's a word that's associated with theater is the magic. Like we don't really know how this is happening, but it's happening, and we love it.
Literally, it's like what? Like the seconds until curtain, and you're like, I don't know how this is gonna get done,
Yeah.
and it always gets done, and you have no idea, but it's just magic. You're like, okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool,
Yeah.
cool, cool.
Yeah. So my last question, I like to always ask people, and you already had given some advice, but advice for young designers who are maybe just starting out in college and realizing that they want to be professional costume designers. What advice would you give them?
I would say first calculate where you are, take in the type of individual that you are at that very moment that you realize, hey, I might want to be a costume designer, because the resources around you might give you a head start with that. And if not, then assess again, going into oneself, what type of learner you are. Like I knew that I flourish in smaller environments, and I love to be stimulated visually in every facet of my education. And so looking at different programs that allowed that to happen and allowed me to be kind of a wildcat with how I design was very imperative for me. And so I would say look at where you are, see if your school or locally, if there's something you can get into, whether it's assisting, shadowing. People are very, very kind when you send them emails, because I've stalked a lot of people and they've actually responded. So if there's someone out there that you feel like is too out of touch to reach, contact them. They're not. And they will be happy to talk to you, have coffee with you sometimes, or if they ignore you, that's also totally fine. Just keep on responding anyway. But again, seeing what type of learner you are, and if the resources are not near you, how can you get it? It's a business of being accessible, and it's a business of being able to adapt very, very quickly. And so if you know that you are big on theater, then think about the big theater hubs. Think about New York City, Chicago. If you know that you want to do film, go to, I mean, Atlanta is booming with the film industry. Film is happening in Louisiana, which is amazing. I mean, definitely go to California if that's something that you're interested in. And if you're interested in a hybrid, kind of like me, then see what you can do personally to be able to dibble and dabble into both realms. Maybe that's going out to a school in California, but then moving to New York, or going to California for 6 months on your own dime somehow and working on film, and then coming back to New York for 6 months and working on some theater, and having that establishment so that you can bounce back and forth. I would say assist as much as you can. And if you want to keep being a professional assistant, then keep on going down that lane. But if you don't want to be a professional assistant, realize where you want to establish yourself as a designer in terms of location. That's very imperative because theater is a community. You will get really, really far once you not only connect in a work relationship with the people that you're creating with, but also on a personal level. That's something that I learned as well. And I would just say never stop learning. I love to look up the costume designers of the films that I see or the Netflix series that I watch, or passing by marquees on Broadway and just looking up the designers to see who's out there, playbills, see who's out there, seeing how they got their start. You're like, some of these people that are Tony nominated or Tony winning designers started as like an intern at like Santa Fe Opera, or like have these crazy interesting starts as like being a waitress, and somebody was like, hey, do you know how to design a film? And they're like, no, and now they have an Oscar. Like, it's ridiculous, and there's no right or wrong way to get your start, but you just have to start. You have to start. You have to produce something. I would say for film, look at film schools. The students there are always looking for someone to work on their projects. There won't be a lot of money, if money in general, but it's a way to get your work out there. And in terms of theater, contacting individuals and seeing if you can start out assisting or just start out designing, and basically making a very, very good campaign for yourself so that they can trust you, that you can get the job done. And my last thing I would say is don't be afraid to fail, because in the failure you'll learn how to bounce back, and also what type of person you're going to become in this industry. And being true to yourself throughout this industry is very, 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 very crucial, because you need to have a certain type of morale in order to pass that along, so that this is a healthy environment for other people to come after you. So I always advocate for be the best version of yourself that you can be, even in the toughest times, because when you lose your mind in the work environment, then everyone else starts to panic. So you kind of have to be the rock of knowledge, if you will, in every situation, so that people could see the end result that you worked so hard to create. So keep going, ask questions, email, don't be afraid to fail, and take leaps of faith sometimes too as well, because you'll be surprised at yourself in the end.
The music for the backstage creative was improvised and performed by Ian Leroy, and the logo was designed by Zach Rimbold.